Vincent Kompany, a product of the Guardiola school, and Kompany makes a move nobody expected. Instead of another sprinter, he decides to put a player on the right wing who will deliver 19 assists in the Bundesliga, while looking like he's running in second gear. This might be Olise's most powerful weapon. The football world is obsessed with acceleration, but it forgets about the break. Olise's greatest physical gift isn't how he starts, it's how he stops. When he carries the ball in second gear, he puts the defender to sleep, and that's his trap, because that's how he adjusts the defender to his own rhythm. Then, out of that slowness, he makes a sudden burst. The defender simply falls away, and that opens the space for those 19 assists. Kompany publicly compares him to Kevin De Bruyne, and Kompany isn't some random manager. He saw that De Bruyne was never fast, but every single touch was a touch that decides a match. And here's something Perez isn't counting on. Olise has already rejected the richest club on the planet once in his career. When even Luis Enrique noticed him, it brings us right back to that question. Why is Michael Olise so special? To understand why Olise rejects the biggest clubs, you have to go back to the moment when they were rejecting him. Spent 7 years at Chelsea, even had a taste of Manchester City, but the ending was always the same. England's elite didn't know what to do with him. But that's not the most important part. The most important part is what he did next. He didn't quit football. Reading was not a romantic stop, but it was the place where Olise became a professional. At 17, he was thrown into the fire of the championship. He gains structure without the ball, starts defending, and learns how to win in the mud. And what he built in Reading wasn't a footballer, it was a brain. That's why Thierry Henry would later say that Olise plays football with his brain, not his eyes.
Michael Olise is a different player. He sees the game, as I mentioned, more often than not with his brain.
But there was one thing the brain couldn't fix: the body. His legs started to fail. 3 hamstring tears in 2 seasons at Crystal Palace. Then Oliver Glasner arrives and changes everything. Why is Glasner the turning point? Glasner was the first manager to recognize that Olise is not a winger. He moved him off the touchline into the half space and built the system around him. And then he gave him a partner, Eberechi Eze, and Olise played football like they grew up on the same street. Palace stopped being a Premier League team and became a problem nobody could solve. The club that released him at 14 is chasing him 6 years later for £35 million. Every major outlet in the world reports the deal is done, but Olise turns them down stone cold. Bayern reacted like a club that sees what others hadn't yet turned into a priority. Vincent Kompany knew exactly what he was missing, and then the numbers confirmed what Kompany saw. In the 2024-25 season, Olise was the outright leader across all 5 European leagues in progressive passes into the box, 70 in a single season, a number that beats every midfielder on the continent. But what happened to the injuries at Bayern? Because at Crystal Palace, Olise didn't have a problem with talent. He had a problem with continuity, a player who couldn't stay fit, and that's exactly why the big clubs weren't looking away from him. And then, in the most brutal rhythm of his career, he becomes the player who is always there, not as a protected project, but as one of the main players in the squad, and without a major injury breaking the story like it did at Palace. The hamstring doesn't break when you stand still, it breaks when you explode. When you start, stop, change direction, and start again. And that's Olise's football. Bayern didn't take a player without risk. They took the player everyone else was treating as a risk, and they removed the last doubt from his body. Why would they sell him now? But here's the problem Bayern cannot solve: the World Cup, because Bayern can control the training. They can control the minutes. But France has a tournament, the pressure of an entire nation, and that's why the World Cup isn't just a reward for Olise's form. It's the most dangerous test of his transformation. At Bayern, the answer was clear. He can do it if the system around him is precise enough. The World Cup is the removal of the protective layer. Bayern gave him continuity. France gives him the stage, and the World Cup asks only one question: can Olise become the player who makes France stop depending on Mbappé alone? And Perez is watching all of it. On one side, the player he needs; on the other, the player already waiting for him in Madrid. And between them, a World Cup that will give the answer no transfer can.